The following BLTV program is brought to you by O'Flaherty Law. Please enjoy.
Welcome, everybody, to this most recent episode of the Seize Your Business podcast. My name is Bryan McDonald from OnPurpos Growth. And what we talk about on this podcast is ways that privately held and small and medium-sized business owners, some strategies and tactics, mindsets, tools that they can use to grab a hold and seize control of their business. And what we're going to be talking about in this episode is, in the latter part of owning a business, how to actually seize the process of selling your business so it's a smooth transaction. And today I have on with me jweber of Water Street Advisors. They are M&A, mergers and acquisitions advisors for privately held business owners focused on Illinois, but have a reach all across the country. So John, thanks for being on, and why don't you give everybody a little bit introduction and background?
Sure thing, Brian. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. My background is commercial banking. Many years as a commercial banker. I've been on both sides of transactions, M&A type transactions, and my partners are CPAs. Both of them have a lot of experience in buying and selling businesses. So we really enjoy focusing on the lower end of the middle market. So companies that are usually between $1 million and $30 million in revenue annually. Cool.
So, before we hopped on the podcast and, we got to talk a little bit, it sounds like there is a very specific process to go through to ensure that there is a smooth transaction, if you want to call it, when you're selling a business, from the time, and that process, it sounds like, starts from the time that you decide that you're going to sell all the way through, the end. So did I get that right?
You completely did. Yeah, you really know the process. Sometimes it's called an auction process. Okay. The goal is that we want to try to, or any M&A advisor's goal should be to try to bring to the table as many qualified buyers as possible so that the seller has the opportunity to compare and choose the best potential partner in terms of buyer for the company. And we say you can divide that up into 4 distinct sections, really 5 if you include the section that you were talking about where the seller's trying to make the decision whether or not to sell. Sometimes there's a lot that goes into that, obviously. And from the point that the seller decides to sell to the point that he selects an M&A advisor, that's kind of one segment. And then there's the sort of the discovery segment, which is once the M&A advisor is engaged, we do a lot of research, looking at the seller's books, asking a lot of questions, trying to find out as much as we possibly can, because basically we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the buyer. And we try to take an approach that is, what would the buyer want to know about this business, and what would the buyer be interested in that could potentially make them want to make an offer for the business. And then as you progress down the path, then there's the marketing phase, which we spend a lot of time trying to find buyers in the business's industry. Especially in the lower end of the middle market, we like to say that a synergistic buyer is typically going to pay the best price for the business. And then the next phase is sort of the bidding phase, where we ask for indications of interest from the potential buyer. And we compare those, and we usually have a management meeting so that the buyers can see kick the tires, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then once that takes place, then we ask them to submit their LOIs, which is a letter of intent to buy the business, and it's usually non-binding, except for the fact that what the buyer will do, or what the seller does in that instance, is they agree to a period of time which we call exclusivity, so that the buyer can do their due diligence on the company. And that's really the final phase, is the due diligence, to the point that the buyer gets satisfied, has all their questions answered. They negotiate a purchase agreement with the seller, and if everything goes well, then the deal closes.
So let's kind of go all the way back to the beginning and dive into the details. In the beginning of this process, what's the most important thing that, business owners that are looking to sell their business should be, focused on or thinking about?
Yes, great question. There's many things, but first and foremost, if you think about the language or the lifeblood of your business, it's really the financial statements of your business. So the seller really should be focused on, if they don't already have good financial reporting, that is something that they should really be working on or getting some help with, so that they can put the numbers in, standard financial statements, generally accepted accounting language, so that we can communicate the good financial condition of the company to the potential buyer. The other thing that, there's a lot of things, but some very important things are that if the owner is so wrapped up in the business that if the owner leaves, the business stops, that's going to be a difficult business to sell.
Yeah.
So, and that's also a difficult solution, a difficult problem to solve quickly. It might be something that takes a little more effort. Maybe there's a need for an advisor to come in, or for them to build a management team. We like to call it bench strength, if you will.
Okay.
But those are a couple of real key things that I would recommend they take a look at. So,
let's say that, if they've come through and they've built the financials to a state that is beneficial to them. And if they were the business as the entrepreneur, and they've got that, management team in place, what do they got to think about next?
Sure. The next thing they need to think about is, I like to call it succession planning. We like to find out from the owner who is the ideal buyer for their business, and what's the legacy that they want to leave. Are they looking for someone, do they really they may not care if the buyer comes in and wants to move the company somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I would say most of the people we work with, they've had employees with them since the day they started the business, and they really care about the well-being of the employees. They care about the well-being of the employees' families. They're interested in finding a buyer maybe that wants to run the business in place. And especially these days, with the value of trying to find qualified employees, there's a real advantage to that. So thinking about the type of buyer is very important. And then the other thing to think about is their own personal planning. What do they do after they sell the business? Are they prepared for retirement, or do they want to go on and do something else? Do they want to play golf every day? What is their family going to do? Are there family members that work in the business? So I would say under the broad category of succession planning, that's probably the next most important thing for them to think about.
Wow. So it sounds like you cross a lot of people that don't have that in place.
That is so true. I guess in the financial world, sometimes people are surprised by that, but I've learned that, it's so much work running a business that you have your head down and you've got sort of blinders on. You're focused on your day-to-day job every day. You don't think about this stuff, and that's where, we try to help, and advisors can help, with kind of walking through those questions, and to try to get the business owner to think about those things.
So So let's kind of start moving the ball forward. So they've got the financials, they got the management team, or that's already in place. They've done the succession planning. And what's next? What's the next thing in the process to start thinking about?
So then, I think at that point, then you're ready to pull the trigger. Right now, you're really ready to sell the business. So one of the first things we do when we meet with a business owner, we're pretty much at that point, is to talk to them about. We like to see the financials before we offer them an engagement letter, and our engagement letter includes some level of what we think the business is valued at.
Okay.
Very important. We have that discussion with the owner. We want to make sure that we're on the same page with the owner in terms of what we think the business will sell for. Now, does the owner need to go get a valuation of their business? You may want to do that. We like to think that when we get an offer from a qualified buyer, that's going to be the best valuation that you can ask for, because that's going to be, a true market valuation of your business. But sometimes having a valuation can help if you have no clue where the business is and you're trying to figure out, hey, if I sell this, what will be the net proceeds to me, and can it help me pay for my retirement? So I would say probably trying to get a pretty good understanding, and some of that could be obtained by talking with the M&A advisor, but trying to get a good understanding for what the business is.
Okay, so then the next step is going to market. Would that be the next step, and finding a buyer?
Yeah. So the next step, we do a lot of work. We actually have an outline that we give to the owner, and we have them fill it out, and then we have a question and answer session, and just trying to get as much information as we can, and then we put together about a 25-30 page confidential information memorandum, and from that we do a 1-page memorandum. We assign the business a code name, if you will.
Okay, I like it.
So that it's confidential. So real key to our process is confidentiality. Small business, a lot of times there's competitors right down the street, and if competitors find out that you're for sale, there's a lot of things that can happen that could be detrimental to the value of the business, such as spreading rumors, trying to take employees away from the business, all kinds of dirty tricks, if you will. So we try to make sure that we use confidentiality procedures wherever we can. And the idea is that if we send out a lot of the teasers to, sort of a hand-selected list that we share with the owner ahead of time to make sure the owner is comfortable with who we're going out to. And then if they sign a confidentiality agreement, if those potential buyers will sign a confidentiality agreement and return it to us, then we'll send the detailed information memorandum about the business.
So then all the prospective buyers get this information, and I'm sure they're sifting through it. It's not just like we'll take it. Another kind of process starts after that, right?
Very much so. And a lot of people ask us about the time frame. It takes 6 to 9 months to sell a business, and I have to say I was skeptical when I first started this business for myself, but it takes every bit of that amount of time, and you just identified a real key reason for that, and that is that once you put this information in the hands of a potential buyer, they're processing the information, they're thinking about it, they're talking to their bankers and their advisors. Hey, could we afford something like this? Mm-hmm. What do you think something like this is worth? And so what ends up happening is there's time that is very justified periods of time, but it's beyond our control. And while we do, constantly monitor and try to remind people that we're waiting for an answer, some people, they're going to take their time and think about it because it's a big decision.
So kind of the the rubber starts, meeting the road at this point. The buyers are, looking at it, disseminating the information. What happens when a buyer comes and says, "Hey, I want to buy this"?
Great question. Yeah. So first thing we do is we ask them to put together what's called an indication of interest. We love to use 3-letter acronyms, so this is an IOI.
All right.
We ask them to put together an IOI, which is not an LOI, but so it's about a 2-page non-binding indication of interest. It gives a range, a price range. And at that point, we also try to do a little bit of assessment of the qualifications of the buyer. For example, can the buyer put together financing, or do they have the wherewithal to buy the company? And then what we try to do is at the same time collect from as many interested buyers as possible these indications of interest, and we give them kind of a deadline and say, okay, we're going to schedule management meetings. And the idea is that, that would allow them, if they put in writing that they're interested, then we feel they have a strong enough interest that they now should be able to have an opportunity to see the company. So at that point, we schedule management meetings, and a big part of that is chemistry, and then also giving the potential buyer an opportunity to actually see the business in action. So
you get the buyer. They send the IOI. Was it IOI, right? Yeah.
IOI.
Just getting the acronyms down.
Yeah. And
they say, let's do this. And they want to move forward. What's the process from there?
So then what happens is then we say, okay, you've had a chance to see this. Do you have any other questions? And usually there's a question or two, or maybe a schedule or a piece of information that we need to get for them. And then at that point we say, okay, what we'd like to do is, if you're still interested, we'd like to have an LOI, which is a letter of intent to buy by this date. And we ask them to submit that. And then, if everything goes well, we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 LOIs that we compare side by side, and we sit down with the owner and we say, which horse do we want in the race? What do we want to? Who looks like the best partner here? And the good news is, at that point, the owner's had a chance to meet all of these people and understand who they are, and hopefully has done some due diligence of his or her own on the company that's looking to buy them. And so then you basically pick one. And usually, as I said, the LOI has a period of exclusivity. So you really have to only pick one.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to give exclusivity to more than one.
Yeah. And how long does the process take after that, typically?
So it's a great question. Typically, the usual amount of time for due diligence is 60 days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And at that point as well, what we also ask for is that the buyer sends us the proposed purchase agreement.
Okay.
The purchase agreement is the legal document that will be signed at closing, basically to turn over the stock and or the assets. The stock or the assets, usually either an asset purchase or a stock purchase.
Yep. So is that the end of the process then?
Yeah, you're nearing the end at that point. You're in what I would call the home stretch.
Okay. So how do we know when we landed?
Well, so the next really touchy part of this whole thing is negotiating the purchase agreement.
Okay.
So it's a very intensive document that has what's called representations and warranties as part of it. And then there's other things like a working capital amount that must be agreed to by both parties that's delivered at closing. Some of these things sometimes can cause tricky negotiations.
Okay.
And this point in the process, it's extremely important to have a good M&A attorney.
Okay.
We recommend that the seller, and sometimes we'll recommend M&A attorneys to the seller, but a good attorney can make this go very smoothly. because they understand what are true risks and what are something, things that should be really paid close attention to, and then other things that can be distractions more so than actual, major risks. Everything carries a risk, but good attorneys know that business is a balance of risk reward. So.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys really understand this process from soup to nuts. So I appreciate you being on and talking through this and helping the listeners or the people watching out there what they need to understand and to expect. Because with many people only going through this process once, not many going through it multiple times, you have to actually understand what to expect, because I think that's really important. So why don't you share with all the listeners and the people watching how they can get a hold of you if they want information?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, Brian. So they can reach me. So John Weber at Water Street Advisor. I'm sorry. It's I'll give you my email address. It's jweber, WEBER, at Water Street Advisors, all one word, .com. And they can also call me on my cell phone, which is 630-201-0348.
Well, perfect. And if anybody down there, if you didn't write it down, don't worry about it. Wherever you're watching or listening to this this recording, we're going to share all that information, as well as the Water Street Advisors website, where you can learn more about them. So again, John, thanks for being on, and everybody, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Seize Your Business Podcast. My name is Bryan McDonald with OnPurpos Growth, and if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn as Bryan McDonald, Bryan with a Y, and would love to connect with everybody there. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks so much for watching our video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Click the subscribe button for new videos every week, and download and review us on iTunes. Visit learn-about-law.com for other legal-related articles and videos. Visit our business podcast and video blog, seizeyourbusiness.com, and visit Making Real Estate Fun for real estate videos and podcasts. Call us at 630-324-6666 for a free consultation.